Greetings, dear ones. We join you this day. Your game is well in progress. You are moving at the speed of love, which is slightly faster than the speed of light. So welcome this day. Let us speak this day, as we've talked about the What Is series. What is this? What is that? From our perspective. One of the things that we'd like you to see from our perspective is what you have termed as duality. Living in a field of duality for a very long time, we'd like to explain a little bit of that. What that is, what that looks like from our perspective, what the future of duality has, how it's going to integrate in different ways. First of all, let's speak about common dimensionality. In other words, you're talking about living in the fifth dimension after moving out of the third dimension. Well, that brings to mind immediately what happened to the second and what happened to the fourth dimension. Well, we'll speak of that a little bit. But the most important part is to know that this is what we call a collective dimension, not multidimensionality. That is quite different. But the collective dimensions are the dimensions in which you live. Now, first, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning of the first dimension. That is unity. And basically what that means is that you are all part of each other. You are all integrated as one being. Now the reality is you're that way now, but you can't see that. You can't feel that. Part of your own energy that you received, and we'll talk about that, keeps you from feeling those connections. But you're connected to everything. You're part of everything. It's very beautiful in some ways and very frustrating in others. So nonetheless, you have this deep connection with everything, but you want to start to evolve, to grow, to do something different. Well, there's no way for one to see oneself when you are everything. When you are finite, it is not possible. It is possible to see yourself. When you are infinite, it is not possible. There's no contrast. So to develop that contrast, you left the first dimension. You moved from unity through the second dimension. The second dimension was not a place where you stay, where you grow and evolve. Rather, it is simply a place where you receive imprints. Imprints that you're going to need for this evolution and this stay in the third dimension. So as you pass through the second dimension, you picked up many imprints that you would normally not have as a spirit connected to everything else. You start to see yourself as separate. One of the burdens that you must carry from this point forward after the second dimension is an ego. Your ego was imprinted upon you in the second dimension. It gave you the first sights of yourself to be able to see yourself in some ways. Gave you a sense of self. And it's very frustrating sometimes because your sense of self, yourself, is much larger than you can perceive. So with that, that's one of the imprints that you would generally receive. On top of that, you also received an imprint of duality. The imprint of duality was very simply contrast. When you are home, when you are connected to everything and every being, there's no contrast. You cannot see each other. The only reason you see a person now is because they are different in contrast than the background behind them. If they are exactly the same as the background behind them, they tend to disappear into that background. So to receive the contrast, you took on stamps of duality. Duality, very simple. They would take you to the outer edges, the extremes of everything. You would look for things to be up, down, good, bad, right, wrong, love, fear, all of the opposites. The reality is in the middle somewhere. There never was a black or a white. It has always been shades of gray. But nonetheless, you perceive things this way because it allowed you to step out of that singularity into a state of pretending to be separate from each other. And duality has worked quite well. Now, as you take these next steps and start anchoring into the fifth dimension, you've also already passed through the fourth dimension. You'll find that as after going through the fourth dimension, you've been imprinted with new imprints. And although you keep trying the old imprints in the fifth dimension, the reality is the new imprints are going to open up millions of times more possibilities for you. So stretching into those means releasing some of the ideas that restrict you from that. Because your bodysuit carries all of your belief systems. It carries who you are, it carries your experiences, your good, your bad, your indifferent ones, all part of this avatar that you use to move through life. Not the physical body, but the bodysuit itself, the energetic bodysuit. So when you work with this in this way, it basically presents itself and gives you opportunities to use it in many different ways. In the third dimension, which you humans have been in the third dimension for some 14,000 years. So the reality is you've been very comfortable where you are. Never before has anyone and any beings anywhere shifted dimensions like you are doing, which is why all eyes upon the universe that can see are watching planet Earth during these times. These are critical times in many different ways, dear ones. These are the times that you set your footprints down for others to follow. Because as we mentioned, there will be many who come to watch, to see how it was done on planet Earth, to figure out the best ways to do their own lives, their own planets, to take things in a new direction. So you are the first ones that have had the blindfolds completely removed. You are on the planet of free choice. And although some of your choices are not completely free, the reality is you have chosen to play this game. Now, with that, you'll also find that new opportunities abound in the fifth dimension. Many of the limitations are there for you to grasp, to start using very practically and very energetically right away. But we also tell you many of your old belief systems keep you from doing it. Number one, your ego. That is a second dimension attribute that you received. Your ego needs a fairly major adjustment, dear ones, because we tell you you are creator beings. And yet it is really not quite possible for you to grasp that you have created everything that you see and you open your eyes. It's not possible for you to grasp that the atoms were moving around inside the room all on their own until you opened the door and they suddenly formed what you were expecting to see. You are creator beings far and beyond your understanding. Many of the stories you tell of masters that have walked upon the earth are sometimes only stories, but the reality is you feel drawn to them many times because you know the truth in them. You know that you have those capabilities. And yet you can't see it in the lower vibrations, mostly because you're looking for the extremes. That is what duality does. The duality has you immediately look for the opposite ends. Well, what happens if I don't do that? What happens if I do that? Not, are you happy doing this or are you happy doing that? But rather, where are the extremes? Even your relationships. You tend to remember your relationships by how they ended. And sometimes how they began. The ends, the opposite ends. That is a duality imprint that exists in many aspects of your life. And as we mentioned, in the third dimension, dear ones, this has been very successful at allowing you to actually find your own energetics and express yourself in these beautiful ways. So it is not a wrong thing. And yet many of the basic understandings of duality do not hold water in the same ways that they once did. You know, dear ones, for the longest time you had to decide collectively what was right and what was wrong. What if we told you those things never existed? The reality is you made those up yourselves. And they help you to move from one level to the next because you learn to work in harmony in those ways. But the reality is there's no cut and dried with any of it. Many of you know that, especially those of you who work with enforcing the law. you'll know perfectly well that there are wide varieties of infractions that can be had and wide varieties of response that can come with that would be very effective rather than to have one idea fits all. Well, you're finding these things out. Now, many of your systems are very simply set up. This is the law. This is the way it is. You break the law, you do this. You don't break the law, you have all these freedoms. Very simple and very effective in the lower vibrations of the third dimension. Are you ready to scrap all these laws and step into the higher vibration? Well, dear ones, we happen to think you are, but the rest of the world is clearly not ready. Yet, you can plant the seeds for that readiness. You can plant and stamp those energies there that you have gone before and bring those thoughts and those ideas to share with those around you. For that is planting the seeds of a higher vibration as you walk upon the earth. Dear ones, the magic is here, so how does that work? And more importantly, what did you get stamped with in the fourth dimension? Well, one of the things that you are stamped with, dear ones, is the capabilities of connecting to your other own dimensions. In other words, multi-dimensionality, not collective dimensionality, not the third, fourth, and fifth dimension. We're talking about the 11 of you, 12 of you if you include your higher self. That is the magic of the threes that hold. The reality is you have 12 of you. 11 of you are all having experiences. The one of you, the higher self, is connecting all of you with not only with each other, but with your own home, with your own spirit. That is your direct connection home. And that is the part of it. But up to this point, dear ones, on your planet with duality, it was important to not see into the other dimensions of time-space. Very simple. It was important for you to only get a reflection of who you were and where you were going and what you were doing. And it worked quite well. But in the fifth dimension, dear ones, that is starting to fade. You're starting to see that there's much more capability of seeing into other dimensions, to hearing other things. Now, just because you hear it from another dimension, does it make it true? Well, this whole idea of truth, dear ones, has already gone by the wayside on planet Earth. You do not share the same truths in these days. You have clearly been separated in your truths. So the reality is, find what works for you. Claim your truth. Dare to speak it, but speak it in such a way that it does not exclude everyone else. Speak it in such a way to make harmony for those who have a different truth to be standing next to you. You are all spirits from home. You simply have different experiences that give you different belief systems. But as you step further into the fifth dimension, you'll even hear parts of your own self that have opposing views of things that you have on your planet right now. And this is part of the balance. You also have many different aspects of things that you can be learned by a spirit as a whole. And as such, you go into this multidimensional experience. And again, the idea was to completely keep it separate from each other. As you move further into the fifth dimension, the walls between these dimensions get thinner and thinner. In the very beginning, you can start to hear things. You might even start to see little shadow figures out of the corners of your eye. You've seen any of the aspects of it. Now, years later, even after that has begun, you can actually start to feel heart connections. In other words, the magnetics of the heart coming through these walls. Sometimes that can be quite confusing, because sometimes you can feel it and pushes you into fear. For it's very difficult to equate exactly where it's coming from. So sometimes it triggers some of those fears that are deep within, having to do with energetics that you do not understand. And yet, other times it gets you very excited about the possibilities. But the reality is you're going to hear different aspects. None of them are perfectly true. Please understand that. What you are doing is exposing yourself to the whole collective which makes up the truth of you. But it's all 11 of you. connected through the higher self, through the 12th dimension. Now, as you continue to move forward, what's happened is you've gone through the 4th dimension. The 4th dimension has imprinted you with the multidimensional capabilities. Again, if you live your life in duality with extreme yes and no, extreme answers, black and white and clear and foggy, and the whole process around it, if you live firmly in those areas, you won't be able to see the new 5th dimensional attributes that you've gained. You won't be able to hear into other dimensions of time, space quite the same way. So starting to release the imprints of duality becomes some of the greatest ways of anchoring in the 5th dimension. And we tell you that is not easy. Does it mean you're going to scrap duality altogether? No, dear ones, we tell you you're clearly not ready for that. But there are many of you here that are here way ahead of the game, trying to find your place, trying to find your comfort, your safe space, if you will, while all this chaos starts to unfold on planet Earth. It will continue for a time, absolutely. But the more important part is to know that you've come with a piece of the puzzle. Now, if you can anchor this, if you can hear many parts of yourself, if you can hear and be around someone who has a completely different belief system of truth than you do, and yet you can still recognize your spirits from home, now you've opened up your multidimensional capabilities. And you start stepping through life in a different way to experience all these fun things rather than so much negate them or so much isolate yourself to only one thought or only one stream of thought. Take a breath, everyone. Anchor that beautiful light in the physical body. Let it flow all the way through you. Feel the connection to the earth as she welcomes that energy you release through your feet. You may take all the negativity you wish and bring it into the earth in these ways. She feeds on it. It is a different aspect than you think. Much the same way that when you inhale, you bring in oxygen into your lungs. You use it, and you exhale carbon dioxide. Well, you would think that that was bad, but the trees don't. The trees inhale the carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. The same is true with Earth. Give her your negative energy. Let her transmute it for you. It actually feeds her in many ways. Now, the Earth herself is making many changes and shifting in many directions, as we've mentioned before. But again, stepping out of duality can have a huge part in whatever small ways that you can, to know that everything is on a scale that runs between black and white, but there is no black and white. There never was. It's all these beautiful shades of gray and all the massive colors in between. So choose your space. But know that duality has been here. You have been raised in duality, and therefore releasing all these pieces is difficult. And yet, to even listen to this, to think about your own duality, your own exercises of what is right and what is wrong, your own set of rules that you either lay down for your children or for other people in your life or for yourself. Stretch them out. Release many of the restrictions of duality. And watch what starts to happen. You'll find natural corrections coming in from different aspects because you've opened the doors to your multidimensional self. On top of that, your ego will need a final rebalancing. That is a second dimensional attribute that will not completely anchor in the 5th dimension in the same way. So rebalancing the ego, for most of you, might surprise you. It means bringing your ego up, not down. The reality is, if we tell you you are God, you have a very difficult time accepting that. Because your ego puts a natural perception on, no, that's not the person we see. We do not see the perfect person you speak of. You have belief systems in your bodysuit that you have gained throughout the whole process. Most of those belief systems are built on duality. Take a look. We've given you a suggestion to move into a field of triality. Triality simply means there is a third stage to everything, and there is. Number one, the universe is built on threes. There are many of your masters that have known this, that have used this to even produce their own forms of magic. Christ was one. Nikola Tesla was another. There are many attributes of people that have used some of these attributes quite well and understood them, but all of them say you can do the same thing. So start looking at the higher realities of what you can grasp, how you can start to work in the fifth dimension, how you can release many of those restrictions and reactions that don't actually exist in the fifth dimension, but they're third dimensional realities that you're dragging into the fifth dimension. Well, these are many times your negative emotions and things that need balancing. There are other ways of balancing this energy. But to go on this grand hunt, to look for all these spirits that you've known from home, some of them you see behind a physical face that you do not know, but they smile and suddenly you know them. This is the search for spirit that all of you are looking for. Connect to nothing and you have found your way home. It's a magical time to be on planet Earth, dear ones. And you are the magicians of the game board. You are the ones who've dared to take off your wings to play a game of pretending to be a human on a very dense planet with a lot of fear on it. But we also know that you came to hold that energy, that higher vibration of the fifth dimension, the pure love that can exist when all the rest has been removed. We will speak much of it, but duality, please do not think it is good or bad. Do not think that it is right or wrong, for those are duality imprints in themselves. But know that your restrictions many times are in your beliefs in duality. All we ask you to do is examine them one by one as they start to come up. Look and see how you can stretch into a higher vibrational reckoning of your own mind, of your own self, by anchoring through the love of spirit. You're closer than you think. You're anchoring quite a lot of love on this planet right now. And for that, dear ones, we are eternally grateful. Please know that you're on a very magical path. We ask you to look at some of these higher vibrational attributes. We're going to start sharing more of that with you, how to live in the fifth dimension, the tools that will work in the fifth dimension once you are able to release some of the second dimensional imprints that you have received. There's much of this. There's much more than we can talk about at this point. But there's much of this coming in the days ahead. And basically stepping up to live in a higher vibrational world does not mean you're abandoning your visions, does not mean you're abandoning your commitments to other people. What it means is that you're opening the door for all of humanity to follow in the most magical ways. Connect your heart and your head together and step forward into a fifth dimensional reality where the most beautiful things exist. Welcome home, dear ones. It is with the greatest of honor we ask you to treat each other with respect. Nurture one another at every opportunity and play well together as you create this new game. We are the group of 9, and we are complete. Aspavo, dear ones. Well, that took a lot out of me. Okay. Have a great month, everybody. Hope you have an absolutely magical month ahead of you. There's so many wonderful things that you can be part of here. Welcome home. And welcome to the fifth dimension. Spab, everybody.